You were live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit for 27 May. So we're all here on Zoom today. At this stage, I have no apologies, but we are just waiting. But I will nonetheless open the meeting with karakia. Tuia te ronga, tuia ke raro, tuia ke roto, tuia ke waho, tuia te hira tangata, ka ronga te pou, ka ronga te ao, humie, huie, tākie. Thank you. I didn't need the words, so all good. Okay, so the order of business will be as per set out in the agenda. Are there any interests anyone needs to note for today's agenda? I'll take that as a no. We don't have a public forum, and so I'll go to page 10, which is the confirmation of the minutes of our 25 March meeting. So they're pages 6 through 9. If anyone has any corrections or comments, otherwise I will look for a mover and seconder.
I'll move that, Judine.
Thank you. Move Mel, second Stuart. All those in favour? We'll just go with hand up or an aye.
Aye.
Great, that's carried. Thank you very much. Chairperson's report. I don't have one this meeting, and I don't have any verbal updates to give, so I will move straight to the General Manager's update report, which starts on page 10, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you. Through the chair, can I take the report as read? It has been quite busy up at the landfill still. We've done a lot. We've started in and done quite a lot of the works on the buttress and the airspace activities. So we've dug probably around about 100,000 cubic meters of the material from the back of the landfill and pushed it into a stockpile alongside the where the buttress is going. And hopefully in the next 2 weeks, the next layers of leachate and repairs will go in place. So there's been some significant movement on that aspect of the landfill. As part of that, the geotechnical stabilisation works, the palisade wall it's called, has been installed, and so that's protecting the boundary from any subsidence, etc. on that where we've been digging. So that's fantastic. And obviously we've got the blanket or global earthworks consent has been granted and is approved now. So all the things are in place for it. So that's really good. The stormwater system is still being constructed. The SRP1 is a couple of weeks probably now away from being complete, but the system is running well. The flocculant system is installed, and so that's another massive step forward for us. We've also got the wheel wash on the site has been constructed, is now in use. And in the recent rain event, we took photos of our road compared to the neighbouring quarry road, which showed ours was essentially clean. And in fact, dirt was being tracked into the landfill from the dirt coming out of the quarry. So it was I was really happy with that as an outcome. So that's fantastic. The compactor at the landfill still being giving us problems. We're actually becoming a bit of a compactor graveyard up there at the moment. Every time another compactor comes, a spare compactor comes in and it breaks down, it gets parked up, no one's fixing it. It's not at our cost, which is fine, but it's quite sad that we got 4 on the site at the moment, and 3 of them probably don't work. So it's quite difficult. Our secondary compactor, the one we've purchased, is due back at the start of May. So, start of June. So at that point, we'll be much happier because we'll have a secondary machine available. Otherwise, everything's been running smoothly. The health and safety actions on the site, we've been continuing with our audits, and we've now removed quite a few what we would have said yellow areas from the health and safety system. So we've demonstrated compliance with competencies on all the machines for the staff on the site, which is a good aspect, and we will keep on pushing. There's a couple of areas where we're still struggling to get an effective resolution. One of them being the bin doors for the big trucks and opening them. We're trialing a different style of tether at the moment, so that there's nobody inside a radius where something could fall out of the machines and cause harm. So it's been an ongoing process for some time. We did try a secondary mechanical door arrangement, which basically didn't work very well because it spread the rubbish around quite a lot. So we're still working for an effective solution on that. In terms of other stuff, we have some new signage and stuff for the website. So that's slowly coming together. So we're hoping to start being able to tell our story and demonstrate our performance on that over the next maybe 6 months. It'll get before it's fully up and running, but there's photography and some other stuff coming forward and some logos and that. So that'll be good. And I think it's timely because the landfill is obviously in the spotlight as one of the bigger emitters in the region. So that's something that we need to keep our focus on as we go forward. In terms of emission management, the main flare has been running, almost constantly. So we are burning gas coming out of the landfill significantly. We've got we're meant to be having the new drilling rig get up to the site in June, but it may slip into July for putting down additional bores for gas capture, and that will help us remove more gas from the landfill. We did get some anecdotal comments that there were some odours around the landfill from neighbours over the last month or two. So we've put quite a lot of emphasis onto increasing our cover material and also going and doing odour assessments in the local vicinity to see if we can identify when that happens and how that happens. So that's another thing that we are focused on. Another thing we've done is we've installed at the site essentially what I call Let's Own Market Road, which is the access to the landfill. So we're basically asking the operators to actually take some, inverted commas, ownership in that road and make it look tidy, make sure there's no litter on that road. We clean up the stuff that people have dumped there if there is stuff dumped there, and so it is looking a lot tidier at the present time. There was a few couches that have been dumped in the drainage ditch and other things like that, so we've tidied that stuff up. So and I'm keen for us to continue to own Market Road from in the lead up to the landfill, so that we keep it tidy. Otherwise, one of the biggest activities that I've been involved with is just working with the NCC and TDC on the JWMMP, or the Joint Waste Minimisation and Management Plan, trying to understand what NCC and TDC's priorities are, and then assist with our priorities into that and try and get that plan coming forward. The plan takes quite some time, so a bit of work going into that, but, and it's being run largely by NCC and TDC in terms of there's a lot of analysis going on. One of the things that we've done is we've got the next swap analysis, or solid waste analysis protocol, going on at the landfill. That's happening this week, so we'll have some very timely data for the JWMMP, so it can feed into that process. So I find it interesting that we've this particular week when that's going on, we've got an inquiry for dumping 4,000 tyres from a subdivision, which wouldn't be particularly normal for us. So there is some issues around the data you get from these things just by the vagaries of what comes into the landfill at the time. We've actually gone back to the supplier and said, well, no, we can't take them unless you do X, Y, and Z. But so hopefully that'll not distort the data too much, which it would have otherwise done. Otherwise, everything's been running reasonably smoothly. The finances are still, we're running surplus still at the moment. To the end of 31st of March, it was around about 1.75 million surplus for the year. So we're expecting the surplus to continue to grow to the end of the year and to be somewhere in the order of 2 million at the end of the year. So part of the reason for the surplus is the sheer quantum of waste coming to the landfill. We're projecting out to about 81,000 tonnes for the year, so which is one of the biggest years we would have ever done. In terms of the ETS holdings, we're currently holding, I think, 33,000 credits more than the allowance. But we talked about that the last meeting, and I think we're in a good position. We will have been chewing into that with this next year's emissions. So, and we've remitted the last year's holdings now. So we're in a very good space, but we're not looking to buy any more credits until, for some time now. And in terms of resourcing, we're still struggling a little bit with resourcing, but we've got additional resource in the form of DS projects helping us out with a range of activities. So that's been useful, and we are pushing forward, and the capital program is actually running reasonably smoothly. We don't think we'll carry over too much money this year. Potentially, depending on what the gas well process goes like, we may end up not being able to spend that piece of money. It might push out into next year, but otherwise we've been running pretty well. So anyway, so I guess that's open to questions.
Thank you very much, Nathan. And look, I've just got a couple of questions myself, just to start. So just the surplus, is any of the carry forward represented in that, or is that separate again?
That's separate from the surplus. So the carry forwards are capital, and the surplus is essentially our operational exceedance. Sorry, I'll sit out of the sun. It's showing my eyes now.
Yeah. And then just in relation to, is there any debt we should be looking at paying off out of that surplus?
Yes, so we're currently carrying about $1.8 million of accumulated debt from the previous year. So we can use that surplus to pay down that debt. And what that will do is that at the moment in our accounts, we have been projecting, or for a $200,000 surplus, so that would go towards the payment of the debt that we accumulated in previous years. We can pay that entire debt off, and then in future years not look for a surplus to, so that's essentially what I would recommend if we were, or when we get to the end of the year and we decide what we're going to do with that money.
Yeah, so it'd be great if Andrew could bring forward recommendations around that. So not carrying debt would be great. I'm sure those people we owe the money to would be super happy. I believe that to be the councils.
Yes. Andrew's not available today. He's on leave at the present time, but I will get, for the next board report, we will have a clarity of where the year ended up, and we'll be able to then make a recommendation of what happens to that funding. Yeah.
That'll be great. Just in relation to Market Road, yeah. Market Road, yep. I do like this, sort of, ownership thing. I think that's really good. Just in regards to safety. So from the Bishopdale end, there's a walkway off the top end of Wesley Place. And a lot of people then walk down Market Road or go to the Grampians, etc. And there is no footpath or anything there. Are there any safety concerns there at all? And to what extent is that our responsibility?
Well, it's a really good point. I personally think we should do something about it. I have had conversations with others about it. It's not our responsibility per se to do anything about it. It would sit within the transport team at Nelson City Council. I have talked to them about it, and there is no specific plan to resolve that. The reason I have a concern about it is just I see people walking their dogs down the side of the road, and there is no footpath to walk down there. There is a verge on there that we could turn into a gravel footpath. Part of the difficulty around this is that it's sitting inside the Nelson City Council's catchment rather than as a joint thing. So the landfill is a joint. The money we get is joint. So if we did something in Nelson, that would potentially disadvantage Tasman. There is some precedent, not in relation to NTRLBU, but in terms of Nelson Regional Sewerage Business Unit, where some money got used for that Nelson Regional Sewerage Business Unit had applied for from government, got used for Tasman District Council's footpath network at Bulk Creek. So there is some reason why we could potentially do something there. So one of the things we might choose to do is look into what it would cost and to put a footpath along there, and whether or not we could contribute toward it, or maybe Nelson and NTRLB could contribute toward it together.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. I'll go to Mel now.
Thank you, Judine. Thanks, Nathan, for your report. Nathan, I'll return to what you were saying about the vehicle bin doors.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, that sounds as though it's insurmountable just about, but so it prompts the question from me, you know, what degree of risk is associated with that that hazard you've identified? What degree? Is it medium, high, low, or where are we?
I don't think it's a high risk of a serious incident, but there is, I would say, a low risk of a serious incident or an injury. We have had one person injured historically, which wasn't the doors themselves, but when a piece of timber came out from the back of a bin, it got caught in the wind and then blew into the person. It was like a sheet of plywood or something, and one of the operators, and he was injured. And so he did have to have medical intervention. And that's part of the reason that we have been focusing on it. What we did is we actually spent money and modified one bin to change the way the doors open, so that instead of opening sideways, where if someone opens them and swings them out, the material can fall towards them. We then had it so it was swinging vertically, but what that did is when they backed the truck up and tipped the truck, it basically pulled all the waste forward and it wouldn't actually empty the bin properly. So that wasn't an effective way of dealing with it. And so at the moment, what we've done is we've moved towards a trial where we actually have some doors where it's like a tether on the door. So when they unlatch the door, there's a chain, the door will swing open slightly onto the chain. If it's got a lot of pressure behind the door, it'll lock at that point, and you'll then have to get the digger up to hold the door shut while you then delatch the door. That way it prevents the pressure of the door swinging into open. If it's not under pressure, the person can delatch the chain and hold on to a tether rope, and then walk 4 meters away from the truck around the back of the truck to pull the door open and latch it open. And that way they're out of any fall zone of any material that would fall from the back of the truck. What we are trying to establish is at the moment, the comments from the site staff was that the wind can catch the doors of the trucks and can therefore jerk the arm, the operator's arm if they're holding onto that tether. And so we're just trying to figure out whether or not there's a slightly safer way from, just for that jerking of the rope essentially, or whether we've got a different handle or something on that. So that's that. It's not. I don't think they're at any risk now of getting injured by material falling from the bins. It's just, are we able to hold those doors effectively on a windy day and not, no one getting any, rope burn or anything like that from holding the doors, So that's the end of the spectrum we're at now. It's not, no one's going to have a big chunk of wood fall out of the truck and hit them and therefore now be injured from that. So we are trying to work through, the process. There was a consideration of whether we would put hydraulic openings or something on the doors, but that became quite difficult because the extra weight of the hydraulics reduces a lot of the payload that each of the bins can take. And when you're bringing a bin from Murchison or from Buller, that's actually a significant cost. And so some of the customers weren't very keen on that side of the solution. So we are trying to work on a slightly more at our end, a slightly more low-tech solution that is still safe.
Right. So you're making good progress. I read from that. That's encouraging. I'm curious to know, Nathan, you mentioned about the drill rig coming on site, and I'd be curious. I'm interested to know, how many more bores you're going to drill.
There's about 50 something bores, so we'll end up with 3 times the number of bores that we currently have on site. It is a significant number. Where we are at the present time, all of our bores are put down, and they have around about 70 meters between the bores. Or it's pretty rough. There's no real clear sequence to it. In the future, we'll end up having a maximum of about 40 meters between bores. So we're really increasing the density. And that basically the intent of that is that when we suck from the bores, the negative pressure or the suction we put on the bore won't transfer 70 meters through the landfill. So you'll end up having a piece between the bores that would be at a higher pressure, and that can therefore release methane back out to the atmosphere. And so if the more bores we have, the tighter they are together, the more suction we can apply, and it will transfer through the landfill at only a certain distance. So we'll end up being able to put the entire landfill under slightly better negative pressure and suck out more gas. So
what time will that take? That 50 bores is a hell of a lot of bores.
Yeah, is quite a is I don't have.
I read somewhere it's difficult boring into that sort of.
It is definitely, it is definitely difficult, and we're not expecting the drilling rig to be a high product, going at high productivity. Our biggest issues that we have at this landfill is fishing nets, in particular. When you drill down and the drilling rig hits the fishing net, it just locks up. It's just like it's gonna. And so we'll end up probably having quite a few dry bores. We will end up drilling down, hitting something we can't go through. We'll have to shift 2 meters and try again. It isn't going to be fantastic productivity. It's going to have some variability in cost because we're going to probably have quite a few dry bores that we do, but it is what we have to do. The drilling company that we've been talking to isn't concerned. They think that they'll be able to do it, but there might be a few false starts a little bit on these bores. So in terms of time frame, it'll be a number of months of work, but it won't necessarily be all in one go. The drilling rigs are booked up, and so we'll end up getting a 2-week period here and then a 3-week period over there, and that will increase our costs a little bit too, because we may have to pay a re-establishment for that rig occasionally.
Thanks, Nathan. Judine, can I squeeze another quick one in? Very quick one. You mentioned there about the Eves Valley flare running well, and you're waiting for the flow meter for the system. Where is that? Is that sort of?
We have all the gear here for the gas analysis on that system, but the flow meter still hasn't turned up. So I need to follow up with the electrical engineer. He's got COVID at the present time, so I haven't talked to him this week. So next week I'll find out from him whether the flow meter is actually in his hands now or not. I'm hoping it is, but I can't confirm that yet for you. Sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Judy.
No worries. Stuart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just have some questions for Nathan in relation to the report. I'm at a bit of disadvantage of one of my devices is not working, so just going by memory, so bear with me. So Nathan, just I think in the report you talked about having people on the face of the landfill directing people. Is that in relation to the tailgate issue that Mel's just been talking to you about? And is that an ongoing thing? Because the people on the face must be a real risk, I would have thought.
Yeah, so actually what we've done is changed the way we run the landfill. We had 2 vehicle incidents where the excavators and compactors came in. Well, actually, the compactor came in contact with a truck, and then the compactor came in contact with one of the excavators. That was some time ago, and that was one of the reasons we immediately got in an external advisor to come in and look at it. There is a very clear spatial separation. So if one vehicle comes within a certain distance of another one, they have to stop. You have to get positive radio contact before one of them can move. And the principal vehicle on the landfill is always the compactor. Every other vehicle has to essentially give way to the compactor. So there's a bunch of rules there. But what was happening before is that there was no clear specific locations where the trucks were required to dump. They would basically came in, and then the guy in the compactor would signal them to come in and dump. And we've changed that, and we put a man essentially up at there as a traffic controller, and that person directs them to, now we have specific bays that are set up, and you go to bay 1, 2, or 3, dump off, and it's very clear where that goes. They've got wheel stops at the back of the bay, so the trucks will back up to the wheel stop and dump over the edge, and then the man who's directing that can stand physically out of the path of the vehicle. So there are concrete blocks that would prevent them from being able to be struck by a machine. So we have actually put quite a lot of time and effort into significant improvements in vehicle movements around the landfill face. So.
I know, that's great. And then just the joint waste management plan you talked about and working with the two councils, how soon are you hoping that will come to the councils? And I think it would be quite important that we have people from this committee on that.
Can I take that and come back to the board on that? It's really more the councils in the council's ballpark. The two councils are driving that process. I have added in, and I think that the governance, they're talking about a governance team for that. And I have suggested that the councillors for Nelson and Tasman, it would be smart to see if they could also be board members for the NTRLBU to get some sort of continuity between the two, or the three organisations essentially. That was my input, but that's not my place to make that decision. It's going to have to go back to the two councils to consider that.
And I guess the other concern as we run up to the end of this triennium, and whether it's in this term or next term, will be the other challenge.
Yes, so one of the things that I had suggested was that rather than naming the individual councillor, you could name the role, which might have been the two members of the NTRLBU from both councils, irrespective of whom they were. Therefore, it would be some sort of nominal continuity with that. But again, that's for the councils to decide. That's not for me.
And then just thirdly and lastly, just in relation to the batteries, and we're funding the collection of that, I've noticed there's been quite a bit of extra promotion as well. And I think you alluded to that we're going to continue that. Do you see that continuing at a high level of
Yeah, so thank you through the chair. I believe it's in the landfill's interest to keep the promotion going well, and hence I have recommended, and I've essentially agreed to fund the disposal cost so that the councils can continue the management and communication at the level it has been going. I've asked for that to go on for the next year so that we really push that message. And it's an important element to not distort the message by saying, well, because it's starting to cost us a lot of money, we don't want you to discharge X type of battery and Y type of battery, because I think that will distort, the ability of people to understand exactly what they have to discharge. From my perspective, don't bin batteries. That's an easy thing for the public to understand. It's easy for them to get involved and do it. And it's not that expensive in the scheme of things for us to fund the disposal. And it has already started to make an effect if the data that we've said, we've shown is effective, because the number of battery fires that we've seen in the landfill over the last 3 months was significantly reduced from the previous 3 months.
right?
Sorry, Stuart, I see Mike's hand up. I'm going to assume that's not a question, but is there something you wanted to add on this this answer, Mike?
Oh no, it's a comment on the joint waste management plan, but it can wait.
No, well, you may as well go now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a comment that we are looking to we started the recruitment process for a full-time waste management officer for TDC, so similar to what Karen Lee does, and to work with Nathan and Karen as well. Great,
thank you. And what was the time frame for the waste management minimisation plan review? Because there's usually quite a long process.
Yeah, I can't remember offhand what that is at this stage. I'll find out and get back to you.
Yeah. Or Alec, do you know offhand?
Through the chair, no, I don't, unfortunately, but I know that there is a train of work in place about bringing a report back to the two committees, or to the councils rather, in terms of the makeup of the Joint Waste Management Working Party, and that will also outline the timelines. And I can't just tell you that right now, unfortunately.
And so that will be this side of October, that initial report back?
That's a good question. I think it will be, but I think the process is potentially going to take longer than that. And as Councillor Bryant indicated, I think the challenge is that we span the elections, and we need that continuity, and we need to think very carefully, even starting before, where even if you put, and I think Nathan's correct, you do titles, but starting before and then breaking continuity and coming back is also not going to serve anybody. So we just need to give some careful thought to that.
Yeah. So someone like Stuart, who never has to have Sorry.
You never know. I just had one further thing about the batteries, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yeah, go for it.
So is the Nelson Environment Centre the only place they can be handed in, the electronic ones, or can they be at the transfer stations?
Oh, through the chair, we've tried to set up multiple locations for batteries to be handed back. So the customer service centres at the councils are doing it. The transfer stations are doing it, and we are trying to work with other people, other organisations, to be able to put in facilities to accept them as well. So commercial organisations, and that's struck a little bit of a difficulty, insofar as it's a little bit difficult, and there is no product on the market at the present time that allows you to have something sitting out in the community, such as a battery recycling box. And so we're actually working with a consultant, just to try and do some fire reviews of a stainless steel style of box that would have some sort of protective measures in it that you could put on the side of the footpath, by the council or something like that, people could essentially post their batteries in. The big risk with it, of course, is that some of these batteries, if they were to short out or arc, or if you had vandalism, that you could set them on fire. Next minute you'd have an issue with a fire, and that in its own right isn't necessarily a huge problem, as long as that device can't spread a fire. And so that's part of what we're looking into at the moment, with seeing whether we can come up with a product that we can sit outside of a few of our essentially car parks or something, those sorts of places where it's away from other buildings, but it can be acted as a battery recycling facility.
Perhaps the current ones just need a bit more promotion as well, because I wasn't aware of that. I think you could only go to the Environment Centre.
No, it's definitely multiple locations, and we've been trying to make it very accessible. So we also wanted them to be alongside public transport facilities, so that people who don't have access to vehicles for themselves can still do this sort of activity.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
No worries. Trindy.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. And sorry if this has been covered, because my internet having a few challenges with bombing in and out. I'm looking at page 16, and it's around the waste minimisation. And on the bullet point 13.3.2, it talks about the separation works. Do we know, Nathan, like nationally, this must be a challenge for all of New Zealand? And is there a model that is actually successful and is, kind of working? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, so through the chair, waste minimisation, I think for NTRLB is a little bit different from a lot of other organisations through the country. I mean, NTRLB only is a landfill. We're not a waste minimisation service. So the waste minimisation activities get undertaken by Nelson City Council and Tasman District Council, and they do a good job of that. What we at NTRLB have been focusing on is, can we also improve the diversion of waste from the landfill? Once it gets to the landfill, is it possible for us to separate out products that are reusable, that we can then send back out and into the industry? And we have done some good work. We got in, 400 mussel buoys that were all cut up, that were for disposal, and from so been in contact with Restore and other places, and we've managed to send out a number of those back out to be sold off as a product for sale. We've been trying to have a small digger with a grab on it to be able to sort through some of the waste and pull out timber. At the moment, the real difficulty with that has been that we don't know what is contaminated with CCA and what's not, and so there's a really difficult element in there. We constantly are pulling out, any metal that is disposed to the landfill, and we're trying to, and so that goes into a skip. And at the present time, we've just set up a tag for the weighbridge that allows us to send that metal out back over the weighbridge and weigh it essentially as a negative transaction. So it goes out and we get the money back for it. So what I'm talking about in the report is our internal sorting mechanisms to see whether we can separate out some waste that goes, they'll essentially send out or do something with, that it doesn't go into the landfill. And it hasn't been particularly successful. And the reason for that, I think, is that by the time it gets to us, it's mixed in with a whole heap of other stuff. So
I get where you're coming from with that, I think. As part of it is human behavior, isn't it?
Yep.
And part of it may still be a lack of education of, once it's in there, it's then contaminated everything. So are we best to continue to push education through NCC, TDC before it gets to the problem on our site?
So I think it's a multifaceted thing, and the answer is absolutely. We need to be working from the top of the hierarchy down. Eliminating waste and focusing in, supporting central government and doing, bottle recycling or bottle reuse, eliminating packaging type stuff. That's all the critical components. Our problem is that we're right at the bottom of the pile. When we're talking about all this stuff, we are actually right down the bottom. We're the receiver of this material. And we don't really, we're an influencer on the NCC and TDC and what they do. We can put in, submissions into their plans. And we can influence up into central government by our responses to their plans. But for me, I see this a little bit like the flare exercise we did at Eves Valley. There is some low-hanging fruit that we can do. We can actually make a small difference. And the question is, should we? And that's what I'm trying to find out is not only should we, but can we do so and do it at reasonably cost effectively. We don't want to be spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on doing something that's not giving us any return, but there's no reason why we shouldn't do something if it's essentially cost neutral. In fact, I think we have a responsibility to do so if it's cost neutral. So if we are spending $5,000 on sorting stuff and sending back over the weighbridge a negative transaction worth $5,000 a month, then I think we should be doing it. That to me is where we get to. But if it's going to be too much the other way, because we're spending $10,000 and getting $5,000, then that's not really our business at that point. I think my view is that where it's neutral, cost neutral, or cost beneficial, we should be doing it. The board can have a different opinion. I don't mind, but that's where I'm sitting and what the judgment I've made at this present time.
Okay. Thanks.
One of our overarching responsibilities is, to try and run, the best possible landfill, and, there's all those different facets around health and safety, greenhouse gas emissions, etc., on what we can do. Some of the national campaigns, unfortunately, are the best ones, like the not having plastic bags in supermarkets. And, I'm sort of hopeful that we'll get more national schemes like that coming through, because in essence, that one got, a lot of pushback. The world was going to end if there weren't plastic bags in the supermarkets. People realized it didn't. But what that does is it gives confidence to, okay, well, actually, maybe I can try other steps in my house. Maybe we can do other things. And so, and the producer schemes, having those come in now, I think is critical, having the producer responsibility for the waste. But both councils need to do also everything they can do. I know for Nelson, we've got our waste trial for kitchen waste trial. and that hopefully, not necessarily in volume per se, but in emissions, that has sort of really good potential, and so that trial's undergoing. And so it's just like so many like housing, there's just so many different facets, and if each could be trying to do their best. Nathan.
Yeah, so through the chair, one of the things that we've also been looking into more from the future of landfilling in the region perspective, rather than specifically for the York Valley, are there technology options that, rather than disposing this material to land, that would allow us to recycle waste or allow us to use this waste for some other purpose. And so we started looking at some of the really big picture things more for the future. And then I stopped that and said, well, actually, let's look and see whether there's something that could deal with our really hard to deal with waste, such as fishing nets. Is there a machine that can turn fishing nets into oil? And therefore that oil can be reused for some other purpose. And so we have gone out and done a bit of work on that. And there are some options out there where we can turn some plastics into, to essentially turn them back into oil as a precursor to go back to plastic again in the future. They are relatively expensive. And when I've done the rough economics on them, they really don't quite stack up. They're very close in some situations. But the big thing that keeps on unpicking the economics of it is the sorting of the material to get it into the machine in the first place, and it gets quite close for us in terms of the economics, because we essentially, when the waste would come into the landfill, someone would pay for it to come in, and we could send it out and process it, and we would keep the money essentially. Because we're not, and we would then be able to on-sell the airspace that we've done that again and get, so we're essentially getting twice the money for the airspace, and that makes the economics look quite a lot better. But there's also a really quite a significant push within the New Zealand community at the moment from a number of interest groups that are really anti-waste to energy style of projects. And they're coming in with a lot of advertising that's saying, if you do a waste to energy project, you're basically, their view is you're locking in the requirement to continue to generate waste. And so there, even if we were to do something like this, which I personally think would be good, there is potentially a lot of pushback in the community, because it's not seen to be focusing on the top of the triangle, the waste elimination and waste minimization. It's focusing on solving a solution at the bottom of the triangle. Now, my problem with that, as the general manager of the landfill business unit, is I only operate at the bottom of the triangle. That's where we accept waste. And if we could do something with that waste and not have to put it in the ground, turn it into another product, I see that as actually moving us up the triangle. But I don't think any other person in the country would actually necessarily, or these interest groups would necessarily agree with that. Now, I'm doing that analysis. Eventually, we might get to a point where something actually looks reasonable for the board, at which point we'd bring it to the board for you guys to consider whether we wanted to go down that pathway. And if we thought we could make something that was cost neutral or slightly cost beneficial, it would be good. But again, I see this as like the flare at York Valley, at Eves Valley. Sometimes we've got to do stuff. If we can, it's the right thing to do. We should get on and do it. And so, but we can't go off and spend huge amounts of money doing so, not at the cost of the disposer of that material. So, anyway.
Thanks, Nathan. I'm glad you mentioned the reverse, or possibly, if I could add, the perverse side of the coin, because, I would also have those concerns around, I agree with the finding the alternate uses, but yeah, for me, the analysis would have to look at, it then does somewhat undermine the top of the pyramid, which is the avoids and the reducers, because to then have a cost-effective model potentially requires the perpetration of that plastic waste to keep producing the oil, for example. So yeah, that to me is a critical part of any analysis, because I don't want to be part of the perpetuation of waste. Andrew.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Yes, Nathan, when you talked about scale of economics, with turning the plastic back into possibly oil, is that just from the waste that we create here in Nelson, or would you have to be bringing in other waste?
No. One of the things that we looked at initially was we started looking with our consultants for the future of landfilling the region and a really big picture stuff at big things. And I said, no, let's hold off that for a bit and let's actually focus back down onto little things. We're not talking massive amounts. I mean, one of the devices that I've heard about and been reading about only does 2.5 tons a day. And it's not incredibly expensive. It was between $2 and $4 million. So it's not a huge cost for that device, and it's not a huge amount of stuff that goes through it. And the key thing, that the reason I wanted to focus down at that level, is you can potentially almost do it as a trial. And the key thing is the amount of money you've got tied up in it isn't so much money that you absolutely have to keep it going all the time, every day, for the rest of its entire economic existence. So the intent of that was, I don't want to get into a trap where we've invested $150 million in a plant and we absolutely used to use it, and therefore we need to have waste coming from other places or whatever. If we were able to do it at really small scale, it might allow us to just take the waste we have that's difficult for us to deal with and actually solve some of our operational problems while doing something good at the same time, and not investing so much money in it that if we don't get that waste in the future, we're not going to be really upset about it.
Yeah, I do hear Jadine's corridor. We probably preferred if we didn't create that waste, but since there's so much within the system or within the way we live now, I do like the idea of turning it into something that could possibly be used later. I'm assuming that we could store it for a time being, and it could be used if need be later on down the track. Seems far better than leaving it in the ground just to sit there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nathan.
Yeah, so I will keep working forward on that work. I don't have any particular time frame in mind. I mean, if at the moment we'd need to find something that looks and economically and sustainable from an environmental perspective at the same time before we'd even go there. So yeah.
Kia ora, thanks, Nathan. Okay, if there are no further questions, then I'll go to the resolutions on page 10, which is receiving the report and just noting the report on the carry forwards will come forward. And then also just not a resolution, but just noting that when Andrew has his financial report next time, we'll also, after the end of the financial year, it will also look at the debt pay down and how much we could possibly do while still giving us just some reserves. So is someone happy to move those two resolutions? Move Stuart, second Mel. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we now have a resolution on page 4 and 5 of the agenda, and this is to go into confidential part of the meeting for the confidential minutes and for the report on the gas management update. And the reasons are stated there in the agenda. Is someone happy to move we go into confidential? Move Trindy. Second Andrew. All those in favour?
Aye.
Great, that's carried. Thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll give GAs a moment to switch over into confidential. But what we might also do just before we go to that report is we might just have a, it's 10:23, so come back at 10:30, just grab a coffee, stretch your legs, and then we'll come into the confidential session.
Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora.